In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to create this energetic logo reveal. Welcome back everyone, hope you're doing well. If you're new to the channel, my name is Shaul. This is Animation Deconstructed, and there's lots to learn in this video, so let's jump straight into the tutorial. So inside After Effects, I just have a composition 1920 by 1080p, 30 frames per second and 7 seconds long. Just going to zoom in over here. Most of the animation is going to be 5 seconds long, so I have a logo here, just brought in from Illustrator, which is just a trace, and then a background layer with a gradient ramp. One color set to black and the other one just to a dark gray. And then I just pulled it down to the bottom here. You can see what's happening over there. And in order to create this energetic logo look, we're going to add an effect called Vegas. But before we do, let's just duplicate our logo, hide one so we have a backup. Come over to the effects and presets, type in Vegas and double click this or drag it onto your top layer. First things first, let's change our blend mode to transparent. We don't want to see the logo. Let's change our segments to 1. Let's change the width down to 1 as well. And then let's change our color to 92F1FF, which is a light blue. And then at 0, I'm going to turn my rotation on, move over to about 5 seconds, and let's do about 6 revolutions. And if I just drag here, I want a bit more randomness, so I'm going to click on the random phase. Now you'll see that becomes a bit more random. And then we're going to animate the length of these lines. So at frame 0, let's take this down to 0, the length. Turn the keyframe on, and at about half a second, so 15 frames forward, let's make this about 0.320. Press the U key to see all our keyframes. And let's select both of these, hit the F9 key, and just take a look. I want to add a bit more of a sketchy feel to this, or an electric feel to this. The way we're going to do this is by dropping down the image contours and then playing with the tolerance. I'm going to drag this right up to the top. The maximum this can go is 5, and you'll see that this becomes very inaccurate when looking at it as a trace. Now we could go through and animate this by clicking on the stopwatch and moving through, or we could alt click on it and add an expression to this. So whilst everything's highlighted, I'm going to type in wiggle, open my brackets, and let's put 2 numbers inside here. I'm going to type 11 and comma, let's say 18. What this is going to do is adjust this number, this value 5, 11 times every second. But I've made this really high, so the maximum is 5, but I've said 18. So it's either going to always be at 5, or it's going to be really low by 0 a lot of the time. So it's not going to spend a lot of time in the mid values. The other thing I want to play with is the start opacity. So I'm going to move over to 20 frames, turn the start opacity on, press the U key once and then once more to turn the keyframes on, and we can see them. And I'm going to press shift page down. Let's take this down to, let's say 0.46, shift page down, take this back up to 1, shift page down twice. Just want this to be pretty random, and let's say about 0.32, then shift page down once more and take this back up to 1. At this point, I want this to also fade out and my actual logo to come in. So what I'm going to do is press shift and T to bring up the opacity, turn it on. Let's drag this back and then drag this down to 0 where we are. Let's select all these keyframes and press the F9 key and just give this a preview. All this needs is some glow to it, so I'm going to type in glow. Let's double click that to add it, and let's just add one more glow, Control D whilst that is selected, and up the radius to about 50. This will just give a soft glow on the outside. Now it's pretty easy to create the rest of the colors. I'm going to close that down, Control D to duplicate this, and I'm going to press page down 4 times, so I'm 4 frames ahead. Let's move this forward and snap it. So just going to shift select both these. Let's change the color to fuchsia. Select the top one. Let's change the color of the effect. So this one's going to be FF9292, just a red. Let's move forward so we can see it. And then to randomize this more, let's come to the top here and can pull up this image contours, come to random seed, and let's type in something like 19 and it'll jump to a different state. And then I'm going to Control D to duplicate again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Change the color of this, let's say a light yellow. So triple F5B3, and then just change this random seed to something else, maybe 108. And I'm also just going to change the wiggle on this one so it's quite different. So pressing U 3 times will bring up anything that we've changed. We can see our wiggle there. Let's make this 555 and take a look at how this looks. Let's close that up. I want to shift select all of these and duplicate this and then I'm going to drag it to the top. And an easy way to do this is just to pull down slightly until you see this line and release. All of them will jump up. Let's click over here and change this to a different color. Let's check the cyan. I'm going to solo this first layer, select it, and I'm going to change these segments. Just pull up on the image contours. We don't need to see that. Change that to 4. You'll see we get a whole bunch of lines. I'm also going to press the U button, and we need to adjust a few things. So the length, let's change this to 0.180, but you'll notice that this is really going to spin too quickly. So I'm going to move over here and let's get it to draw on the opposite way around. Change this last keyframe to 0 and minus 300. So what I want to do is essentially make a snappy kind of animation. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to alt click on the random seed. I'm going to add a time expression. So I'm going to type in time and then press the star key for multiply. And let's choose 4 and press enter. So at every second, it should be 4 times 1 second. And if we move to 2, it'll be 8. So it just takes that multiplier and multiplies the second by that. Press play, you'll see this snappy kind of animation. Going to close that up. Let's solo the next layer. Press U. Move forward to about here. I'm going to leave the segments on this. Let's just change the length to something really low, so 0.03. Let's fix the rotation as well, so 0 and minus 300. And then the same thing with the random seed. Alt click on the stopwatch, time times, let's say 3 this time. Solo the top layer, press the U button. Let's make this even thinner, the last length keyframe, so 0.02. Move over to the end here, and we're going to change the rotation to 0 and then minus 300, and then alt click on that random seed again, time times 4, and then just pop this back up, unsolo it, and give this a play. We just need to duplicate once more. I'm going to select the original layers, Control D, take this to the top, and I'm going to drag this across to, say, about 11 frames forward, and just snap that over there. Let's change the color and to make this green. I'm going to swap these two around as well, so let's just bring that back. Drop that down and just solo it. And I want a really thick line. So if I come over to here and just change our width, let's say about 10, you can see that we get this bright light. And what I want to do is just to cut these. So let's say we bring this in and we Control Shift D to cut it. And then so we just move forward again and Control Shift D, delete. But I only want the first one to be really bright. So I'm going to take the next one down to width of 6. And then these last two, we're going to change the width to 6 as well. And then I'm just going to duplicate once more this red one. I want it to end on red as well. So let's just drag that off. I'm just going to play with these cuts until I get something that I like. So I've cut this up and I've just moved them over. So it's just after 1 second, we have these just turning on and off. The other thing that you can, I played with the random seed until I got the part of the logo that I wanted to see when this turned on. Just going to give this one preview so that you can see it. In this next part, we're going to be taking a look at how to create this vector explosion. So let's start with a fresh composition, 1920 by 1080p. We only need this to be about 3 seconds. Hold down on the rectangle tool if that's what you've got showing, or just hold down, and we want to choose ellipse tool. Double click this and then press U twice and it'll bring up the size. And I'm going to hold Alt and double click on the constraint proportions. This will create a perfect circle for us. Let's make it about 580. And press OK. The other settings that I have is I don't have a full on, so I've turned that off at the top here. And the stroke, I just have a solid stroke, and my pixels anywhere around 60 to 80. So I want to create just a simple pop. I'm going to press Shift and S to bring up the scale. I'm going to keyframe this, take this down to 0. Let's move over to about 1 second and just drag this up. 78 should be good. Select both these keyframes, press the F9 key, and we're going to go into the graph editor just by clicking here. Now you want to make sure that you are in the edit speed graph, and then we're going to shift and select these two. We're just going to play with this shape. So I'm going to drag this back, I'm going to drag this back. And I want it to come in really fast and go out at the end. Something like this. Exit the speed graph, and then we're going to play with the size of the width. So I'm going to turn the keyframe on for the width. Let's make this really high, so maybe double this, 170 maybe, and move over to 1 second. and just take this down to 0. Select both keyframes and press F9. I want this to start a bit later, so comes in and just goes out. I'm going to select both keyframes, go into the graph editor, and just going to select that first one. Just do something like this. I'm going to press the U button to close that up, and we're going to add a few effects to this. Let's come over to the Effects and Presets panel, type in Turbulent, and we'll use the Turbulent Displace. Double click that. I'm going to change the Turbulent to Twist. Let's adjust the complexity to about 4.1 maybe. Looks good. You can already see these little parts breaking off. Let's move to the first frame. Let's drop this down to about 46 and scale. Also stay in the 30s to 40s. I'm going to move forward just to see what this looks like. Press the U key so we can see our keyframes. Let's turn these both on. So mount and size, turn the keyframes on. Press U once and then U again to see our keyframes. We're going to move forward. I'm going to stay around here so I can see what's happening. Then I'm going to drag up on the amount. We want to go really high. Let's choose something like 650. And the size, let's take that to about 41. Then I'm just going to change my renderer to full so we can see what's happening. Let's drag these off to the end. Select all of them, press the F9 key and go into the graph editor. Select all these, drag back here, select these and just drag back. You want to create some sort of arch like this, that it comes in quick and then exits at the end slowly. Leave the graph editor. We're going to add a few more effects here. So come over to the effects and presets. Let's type in vector blur. So vector, and come over to CC vector blur. Let's change the amount, let's say about 10. Let's also drag up on the angle offset to about 80, and you'll see it changes the way these look. Let's go back to the effects and presets, type in mini, and we're looking for mini max, and this is going to help join or split up little particles of this. I'm going to go to the operation. I want to look at the minimum areas, and you don't need much here. Let's say about 3 pixels radius. Let's also change the channel of this to look at the alpha, and then I'm just going to come over and add a fill as well. So drop that on, and I'm going to change this to FFE349. That'll be our yellow. Just give this a play. Now it's quite easy to create the rest of the colors. I'm going to just Control D this, move this forward about 3 frames, change the color. Let's say FF4747. This will be our red. And then down in the evolution options, if we just drop this down, you'll see random seed. Let's change this to something like, let's say 230. Duplicate this layer again, move it forward 3 frames, change the color, 41BAFF. These are just more saturated colors than what we're using in the other scene. Let's go over to the evolution options, drop that down, and let's duplicate this to 460. Change all these layers to additive. Right click, new adjustment layer, add a turbulent displace. I want to just add a bit more displacement to this. So the amount I'm going to take up to 127, and it won't look great. Let's take our size down to about 7. I'll turn this on and off. Change the quality to high as well. Let's then add radial blur. So type in radial. I'm looking for the one that you would find in Photoshop. So this one right here, not the CC variants. Just double click that. Change the spin to zoom. It's going to give our burst kind of effect to this. Change that to high. Don't want to play with any of the other settings. But what I do want to do is add a bit more texture to this. The way we're going to do that is right click, new solid, call this texture. Effects and presets, let's type in fractal. We're going to choose fractal noise and just change a few settings here. So the contrast, let's say about 270, so about 10 for the brightness. Change the complexity, 4.3, that looks good. Drop down the transform, and we're going to take the scale down of this. Let's say 40. Then I'm going to just change the mode to stencil luma, and if I just turn that on and off, you can see what's happened here. Change this to full resolution and just give you one play. Let's now add this vector explosion to our scene and then add some animation keyframes to bring this all together, and then add some text as well for the logo reveal. So we're back in our main composition, and I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to call this explosion, and I'm going to come in and just drop this just above the backup of our logo. Let's also change the color of this to something like blue. Let's move this into place. So around 120, bring the explosion in. Now I want to duplicate my logo, bring that above the explosion, I'm going to turn it on and just move forward. Now I don't want my explosion to actually be inside this logo, so I'm going to select it. With it selected, come and hold down here, select the pen tool, and we're just going to, you want your explosion selected, so we're just going to mask this. And you just want to trace this around. So I've just completed my mask. I'm going to hold down and come to the mask feather tool. Let's just drag, click and drag in, and press the M button to bring up the mask properties and click inverted. Now I've got our logo above here, and I'm going to duplicate this explosion, drag it above the logo. Don't need our mask on here, so we can just turn it off. And what I want to do is actually select the logo, come over to track matte, and say alpha matte. What this is going to do is, as this burst comes in, it's going to start masking in parts of the logo. I'm going to select these two layers, just make them a similar color. Let's duplicate this logo once more. Don't need the alpha matte on here, but what I do want to do is come over to about 2 seconds, press the T key for opacity, take this down, and you'll see this is where the explosion is already starting. Keyframe this, move forward to about 2.5 seconds, so 2:15, and drag this up to 100. Then I'm going to select all of these, press F9, and just take a preview. Okay, something else we need to do is now just add movement. I'm going to deselect everything, come up to layer, new, null object, rename this to size. Let's just pull this up, and you want to select all your logo layers. So shift select those, control click the others, and then just pick whip the null object. Then with the null selected, I'm going to press the S key for scale. I'm going to turn on the scale. I'm going to take this down below, let's say about 87, then move to about 2 seconds, let's say 95, then shift page down to move 10 frames forward. Let's make this scale 105. I'm going to shift page down and just add a keyframe so that we keep it at 105 holding. And then at 3 seconds, I shift page down again. I'm going to take this down, let's say about 82. Also want to add some texture, so I'm going to go over to layer, new, text. It's going to choose something like Lato, bold, selection tool. Let's drop this down. Now we just have to move this null object up. So at 3 seconds, you can select the scale, the size, null, press Shift P for position, keyframe. Let's move this keyframe back and snap it by holding Shift. And then we can just select the null and let's move it up. Then we can select all 4 of these, press the F9 key to make them easy ease. Go into the graph editor, let's select this button right over here to zoom in. And then I want to just select all these at the end here and then just pull slightly back. So I want this to go fast and then slow down at the end. We can exit the graph editor. Let's just zoom out and take a look at this little area. Last thing we need to do is just fade in this text. So select it, press the T key, keyframe, and let's move back to round about here and take it down to 0. Select both and press the F9 key. Now I want some more impact here, and I also want some more glow to this. So without anything selected, I'm going to go over to layer, new, adjustment layer, come over to effects and presets, type in glow, double click this, and let's adjust a few things. So I'm just going to drag up on this, say about 66, leave that at 10. Let's duplicate this glow. Let's take this into the 90s, round number 93, and the glow radius, let's take to 29. Then just the intensity, it's a bit strong, so 0.5. And I'm pretty happy with that look. As this burst happens here, I want to fade it out. So at about 220, let's say, press the T key for opacity, turn it on, and let's go to 3, and just take it down to 0. Select both these keyframes, press the F9 key, and just, let's actually move these back. So I'm going to select both these, and just 2 seconds, and something like this. So it's actually turning off. Finally, let's add some lighting to the scene to bring this all to life, and then also add some color grading and some texture to this for the final animation. So I want to create some lights which are going to be flashing around this logo, and this is pretty easy. If we just come over here, select our main composition which has all the animations in it, Control D to duplicate, and let's open this up. Let's drag up here and move to the beginning, and then I'm going to select everything except the null and these logo layers with the lines. So everything else we can select and get rid of, including the back. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this to lines and drag this onto our composition, and let's call this lights, and just move forward slightly. I'm going to right click, create an adjustment layer, come over to effects and presets, type in Gaussian, choose Gaussian blur, and we're going to just drag up on the blur. Let's make this really high, so 118 maybe. Repeat edge pixels just to make sure. Then I'm going to start adding some glows. So let's add a glow. Just going to add some random figures. So 80. Let's take this glow radius to about 60. And I want to change the glow operation to none. I'm going to duplicate this glow, adjust this a bit more. Let's take this up slightly and take the radius to about 350, let's say. Duplicate that. Drop this down, threshold to about 62, and the glow radius, let's take it up to 780. We're starting to get this glow happening. Next thing, we just need to blur this out a lot more. So I'm going to add another Gaussian blur. I'm going to drag this up. Let's make this about 800. That's looking a lot better. I'm going to repeat edge pixels, and then I'm going to add some noise to this just to smooth this out. So typing in noise, let's choose this one over here. Let's add about 3 to this, and I don't want any color used. Let's take this up a lot more. So let's say about 44, and that's looking pretty good. This kind of textured light. Going to close this and close this composition as well. We don't need to see it. What we want to do is drop this lights composition on top of the background. Change this to additive, take down the transparency. Let's go really low, so maybe 5. Could even solo just these bottom 2 layers so we can see what's happening here. And then I want to add a wiggle to this opacity, so I'll click on stopwatch, type in wiggle, let's double click on that if it just pops up, and then type 10, 10, and enter on the numpad, or just click away, and we should get this flickering animation. Going to drop my rendering down to half again and just unsolo those two. Now, in order to do the color correction and everything else, I want to come over to the demo start, which is what I started with. Drag this onto a composition. Let's rename this to final logo. And then I'm going to move forward just so I see everything. And I want to right click, new adjustment layer, and I want to add a curves adjustment. And this is just a simple S curve. So we're going to pull down here, and we're going to come to the top here and just pull up. And you really don't need much as you pull these up and pull these down. This is basically your highlights, and this is basically your darker areas. Then I'm going to come over and just add another noise. Same one we used before, say about 3. The last adjustment layer I want to add is just a red pop at about this point here when it bursts. I'm going to right click, new adjustment layer, add a fill. Red should be fine. Let's change this to additive. Press the T key. I'm going to take this really low to about 10%. I'm going to zoom out, and with my circular tool, I'm going to click and I'm going to drag to draw a mask. I'm going to press the M key 3 times to see the mask properties, and then drag up on the feather. So take this really high, 670 I have it, and then mask expansion. Let's just expand it so that we get something like this. So I'm going to press the T key for opacity again. Let's drop this down slightly more to about 8. Then move over to 204 when the logo starts coming in. I'm going to keyframe that, move back to 2 seconds, take that down to 0, and then I'm going to move to about 2.5 seconds and just take it off to 0 again. Select all of these, press the F9 key, and we're just going to give this one last preview at full resolution and just take a look at how everything comes together. If you'd like to see more tutorials like this, take a look at either of the videos popping up on screen right now. Keep animating, and until next time.